This is lab 2 in which we have to build the VPC and launch a web server. So lab overview and objectives are: in this lab you will use Amazon Virtual Private Cloud to create your own VPC and add additional components to produce a customized network. You will also create a security group. You will then configure and customize an EC2 instance to run a web server, and you will launch the EC2 instance to run in a subnet in VPC. So Amazon Virtual Private Cloud enable you to launch Amazon Web Services resource into a virtual network that you defined. This virtual network closely resembles a traditional network that you would operate in your own data center, with the benefit of using the scalable infrastructure of AWS. You can create a VPC that spans multiple availability zones. After completing this lab, you should be able to do the following: create a VPC, create subnets, configure security group, launch an EC2 instance into a VPC. So task 1 is to create your VPC. Let's go to VPC. In the top right of the screen, verify that. And North Virginia is selected, yes. Choose VPC dashboard. Shows VPC dashboard link, which is toward the left of the console. Create VPC. Let's create a VPC. Choose VPC and more. And under name tag auto generation, keep auto generate selected. However, change the value from project to lab. Next is keep IPv4 CIDR block set to this. For number of availability zone, choose 1. For number of public subnet, keep 1. Private subnet, keep 1 setting. Expand the customized subnet CIDR block. Change public subnet CIDR block in US East 1A to /24 and this to 1.0/24. Set NAT to in one availability zone. Set VPC endpoint to none and keep both DNS host name and DNS resolution enabled. In the preview panel on the right, confirm setting you have configured. VPC is lab VPC subnet is lab subnet public 1 US East 1A, lab subnet private US East 1A, and route table is lab route table public, lab route table private 1 US East 1A. Network connection is lab IGW LabNet public 1 US East 1A. So at the bottom of the screen, create VPC. So this VPC is created. Next, choose View VPC. The wizard has provisioned a VPC with a public subnet and a private subnet in one availability zone with route table for each subnet. It also created an internet gateway and a net gateway. So it has created an so it says to, for example, choose subnet to view the subnet details and so on. So this is done. An internet gateway is a VPC resource that allow communication between EC2 instance in your VPC and the internet. The lab subnet public 1 US East 1A public subnet has a CIDR of 10.0.0.0/24, which means that it contains all IP addresses starting with 10.0.10.0.x. The fact the route table associated with this public subnet route network traffic to the internet gateway is what make it a public subnet. A NAT gateway is a VPC resource used to provide internet connectivity to any EC2 instances running in private subnet. In the VPC2, without those EC2 instances needed to have a direct connection with the internet gateway. The lab subnet private 1 US East 1A private subnet CIDR has 10.0.1.0/24, which means that it contains all IP addresses starting with 10.0.1.x. So here we have completed task 1. So task 2 is to create additional subnet. In this task, you will create 2 additional subnets for the VPC in the second availability zone. Having subnet in multiple availability zone with a VPC is useful for deploying solutions that provide high availability. After creating a VPC as you have already done, you can still configure it further. For example, by adding more subnets, each subnet you create resides entirely with one availability zone. In the left navigation pane, choose subnet. You will first create a second public subnet. So let's create a subnet. VPC ID is lab VPC, which we don't have here. Yes, this one. Subnet name is lab subnet. Public to availability zone. Select the second availability zone. For example, US East 1B. And let's create an IPv4 CIDR block. So let's have IPv4 CIDR 0.2.0/24. The subnet will have all IP addresses starting with this. Okay, let's create subnet. You have successfully created subnet 1. Choose create subnet and lab VPC. Name is going to be lab subnet private 2, and availability zone is select the second availability zone, for example US East 1B, and IPv4 address. So IPv4 subnet CIDR block is this one, and let's create this subnet. So the second private subnet was created. You will now configure a new private subnet to route internet bound traffic to the NAT gateway so that resources in the second private subnet are able to connect to the internet while still keeping the resource private. This is done by configuring a route table. A route table contains a set of rules called routes that are used to determine where network traffic is directed. Each subnet in a VPC must be associated with the route table. The route table controls routing for the subnet. Let's go to route table, and in the route table select lab, which we lab RTV. There is no such a route table here. So next point is that in the route table select lab RTP private 1, and in the routes note that the destination is 000/0 is set to target NAT. This means that traffic destined for the internet this will be sent to NAT gateway. The NAT gateway will then forward the traffic to internet. Next is choose subnet association. You created this route table in task 1 when you choose to create a VPC, the multiple resources in the VPC. And that action also created lab subnet private 1 and associated that subnet with this route table. Now that you have created another private subnet, lab subnet private 2, you will associate this route table with that subnet as well. In the explicit subnet association panel, choose Edit Subnet Association. Leave Lab Subnet Private 1 this selected, but also select Lab Subnet Private 2. Save Association. Select the Lab RTB Public Route Table. Routes. Again, Edit Subnet Association. Select Lab Subnet Public 2. Save. So here task 2 is also completed. So next is task 3, create a VPC security group. In this task you will create a VPC security group which act as virtual firewall. When you launch an instance, you associate one or more security group with the instance. You can add rule to each security group that allow traffic to and from its associated instances. In the left navigation pane, choose security group and then create a security group. And security group name is going to be web security group.
Description is enable HTTPSX, SS, and VPC is choose the X to remove the currently selected VPC. Then from the drop down list choose lab VPC. And in the inbound rule pane choose add rule. Type is HTTP. Source is source type is anywhere IPv4. Description is permit web request. Now let's create security group. Now task 4 is to launch a web server instance. In the search box search EC2 and now task 4 in EC2 instance. From launch instance, choose launch menu instance. Menu, choose a launch instance and name the instance web server 1. When you name your instance, AWS creates a tag and associated with the instance. A tag is a key value pair. The key for this pair is name and the value is the same you enter for EC2 instance. Choose an AMI from which to create an instance. In the list of available quick start AMI, keep the default Amazon Linux selected. Also keep default Amazon Linux 2023 AMI and the type of Amazon machine image you chose to determine the operating system that will run on the EC2 instance that you launch. Choose an instance type. In the instance type panel, keep the default. Okay, select the key pair to the associate with the instance from key pair name. Select VOC key. The VOC key pair you selected will allow you to connect to this instance via SSH after it has launched. Although you will not need to do that in this lab, it is still required to identify an existing key pair or create new one, or choose to proceed without a key pair when launched to instance. Configure network settings. Next to network settings, select edit and then network, lab VPC. Subnet is going to be lab subnet public 2. Select it. Auto sign public IP is enable. Next, you will configure the instance to use web security group that you created early. Under firewall, choose select existing security group. Select web security group. This security group will permit HTTP access to the instance. In the configure storage section, keep default settings. Confirm a script to run on the instance when it launches. Expand the advanced detail. Scroll to the bottom of the page, then copy and paste the code shown below into the user data box. Let's copy this, paste it here. This script will run with root user permissions on the guest operating system of the instance. It will run automatically when the instance launches for the first time. The script install a web server, a database and PHP libraries, and then it downloads and install a PHP web application on the web server. At the bottom of the summary panel on the right side, choose launch instance and then select view all instances. Wait until web server 1 shows 2/2 checks passed in the status. It's running and status is passed. Now select the web server and copy the public IP address. Open in a new panel. So the web page shows AWS logo and instance metadata values. So this lab is completed. Let's submit this for grading. Submission report is being generated. So we got 30 out of 30 and everything is created successfully. So this lab is completed. Thank you.